Hello, everyone. This morning I received a message from Otherworld that was a bit mysterious. On waking, I was shown the image of a two-plumed crown, the Egyptian one. I'll put a picture here. Um, Now I recognized it immediately. I was shown it on its own, not on someone's head. I don't know if that's important. And I heard something whispered to me about the middle, the middle of something. Um, at first, I thought they were talking about the Middle Kingdom of Egypt, but I think that was just me trying to make sense because I couldn't quite hear what they were saying. So, this image that I was shown is called a shooty crown. Now, the shooty crown is not just an actual crown of Egypt that was worn primarily by the gods, but it's also a hieroglyph. And this is really important because I wasn't shown it on someone's head. So the Shuti crown was always assumed to be to ostrich feathers or falcon tail feathers. Although when you see it in proportion to how it's worn on the head of deities and depicted in tombs, it's very large, much larger than you would assume a falcon feather to be, much more on a par with what you would see as an ostrich feather. But they're much more rigid and stand tall, whereas obviously ostrich feathers are floppy. So, anyway, some pyramid text was found that described the shooty crown as the two-plumed ibis crown. Now, many of you will know that the ibis in ancient Egypt is associated with the god Thoth. Now, this makes it more interesting because Thoth is not just the god linked to writing, he's the scribe god, and wisdom, therefore, because you could write down learning, and magic and the moon. But also because he's able to write, he is known as the timekeeper, the recorder of history. And this was something when I was shown this image that I was given as a very keen sense that this image they were showing me was something to do with the recording of history in what we're living through now. Now, the hieroglyph, Shuti, which is drawn in exactly the same way as I was shown it, as an image of a two-plumed crown, sometimes with a sun disk at the bottom of it. That's how I was shown it. Sometimes it's worn with two goat horns or cow horns as well. I wasn't shown it like that. I was shown it with two feathers with a sun disk. And that hieroglyph, Shuti, means truth and balance and judgment, which is really in keeping with the messages that we have been given by Otherworld recently, in that we are being shown the yin yang, we are being, there's lots of themes coming up of the ultimate truth, the truth we know at our core, being true to ourselves, listening to our soul instead of our heads. And the Shuti crown is worn by the goddess Maat and sometimes the goddess Isis, who wears it with her falcon crown as well. Now, Maat is the Maat is not the void. She's like Nephthys. Maat is the chaos in creation, cosmic law, which has no sense of good or bad. Although she is also the goddess of morality, which is interesting, and justice, which leads us back to judgment. She is a foundational goddess. She's one of the very first goddesses in Egypt. She ensures cosmic harmony and balance against untamed chaos. She's, I guess, the goddess of cosmic order, sacred geometry from the chaos, creation from all the ingredients. It reminds me of the magician card in the tarot, in that there's everything's going on and using those elements to create something from them. So there's an element of discernment involved in that archetype of Maat. And I guess that's what leads us back to that sense of balance and justice and judgment, in that she's the goddess in the way we would understand it of you're in the void, you're in chaos, but using your discernment in order to create something beautiful from that. And she's most known for her role in the weighing of the heart ceremony, where it's her feather that is used to judge the deceit the deceased. That's that's probably quite apt, actually. It is used to weigh the deceased, but the deceit. But it's her feather that is in the other side of the scales in the weighing of the heart ceremony. And this is what's so important in this vision of the Shuti that I was given, because Thoth is also heavily involved in the weighing of the heart ceremony, in the fact that he writes down the judgment. So we've got this strong message of judgment, discernment, justice, truth, the ultimate truth, and the recording of that in history and time. The the official logging in, I guess what you would call the Akashic records, the records of time of this judgment. And but this crown, the Shuti crown, is also associated with Isis. Now, she is the mother goddess, the healer, the protector. She acts on behalf of individuals. She puts things back together again. You know, when her husband Osiris was torn into pieces and hidden all over the world and all over the universe, she and her sister Nephthys searched him out and put him back together again. So she's very much a sense of everything's been destroyed and it's heartbreaking, but she's building, she's putting the pieces back together again. And I think this is a really important image that Otherworld have given us today, because you've got the chaos and the carnage, but of creation, but something beautiful coming from it, much like birth. You know, birth in itself, human birth, is not a clean process or a pleasant process. You know, there's gore, there's pain. But then you have motherhood, which is Isis, where you get to nurture this creation. And there's this real sense of something being birthed that we then have to take responsibility for and nurture, because what we put into it now, there's the cat. Say hello, Hamish. Hello, Hamish. That's very timely that we're talking about Egyptian gods and we get a meow come to see us, visited by an Egyptian god himself. He thinks he is. He's very important. Um, so we've got this sense of not just of something being born, but other worlds also telling us to use our discernment and take responsibility for what's being created. Pick out the bits that we feel is important and nurture them. But I was being drawn in this vision to look at the Sanskrit as well. Now, there's a lot of debate about whether ancient Egyptian and Sanskrit share origins. Now, linguists will tell you that ancient Egyptian is part of an African origin language, and the Indian Sanskrit is part of a Indo-European language group, and they're separate. However, speaking purely from a yogic point of view, and from having visited Egypt and learn about hieroglyphs and things, there's a definite parallel with the words not just being words in Sanskrit and ancient Egyptian. There's a definite parallel with the words themselves representing something bigger and more, them carrying more weight, like we would understand light language. The vibration and the sound of the word itself carrying a creational element. It's not just a word we use to speak and record things. And that's something that Egyptian and runes and also Sanskrit share. And I was drawn to look up whether there was a word Shuti in Sanskrit. Now, that was really interesting because the Sanskrit word, which is actually Shruti, but in certain regions of India is said as Shuti, means to be heard, but in specific relation to the divine message, which I think is really important because not only are Otherworld saying something's being created you're going to need to nurture, they're drawing our attention to specifically female deities, but then they're also drawing our attention to a word that means to listen, to be heard in specific relation to the message from the divine. So and divine revelations given to rishis, which were before satgurus and yogis were, those masters who retired into the forest and meditated like Buddha. We would say Buddha was a rishi, that retired and meditated to get the divine knowledge. They followed Kriya Yoga, and Babaji and people like that we would associate with rishis, but they're ancient. They're more ancient than perhaps even Vedic culture, what we understand to be Vedic culture now. You're talking at potentially tens of thousands of years old, predating the Egyptian civilization itself. And there's lots of debate about whether Sanskrit comes from these ancient civilizations before ancient Egypt as well. And that's very interesting because the asteroid Atlantis, which is linked to very ancient civilizations older than the ones we understand, is currently featuring heavily in our sky. So all these things are linking together about listening to divine revelations that are the truth, and that taking those, using our discernment and building what we want to go forward. So the overarching symbolism of what Otherworld are saying today is there is a truth being seen. Maybe today, maybe that's why they're saying today we're going to see a truth, or it might be in the coming days or weeks. And there is judgment and justice coming. The scribe Thoth sees these. Culture sees these and records this truth. Balance, albeit in a new form, will be restored and a new world will form. And this new creation may have been born from chaos, but it has been chosen. The magician has chosen the elements to create this creation. It's not by accident. And we need to protect it and instill in it and nurture it the things that we want to embody when it is grown, just as we would a child. Let me know what you think of Otherworld's message today, and I'll see you again soon.